What is going on, everyone? Welcome back to Kitchen Table TCG. My name is Louie. I hope you're having yourself a fantastic day, and I hope that you are ready to talk about the reserve list and potentially Wizards of the Coast planning and had planned on breaking the reserve list. We're going to talk about all those things with some information from Mark Rosewater with Modern Horizons 3. But first, before we get into there, I want to share with you guys a store project. I think it's just fun to give you guys some of the behind the scenes of what's going on in the store, and a lot of you guys really like that. So if you didn't know, this is our retail space. The lights are off, sorry. This is our retail space. We have some play area over here, and then over here is like all of our play area. This is where people hang out. We have the bigger tournaments, bigger events, that kind of thing. But right here between there, we actually had some lockers in the store that I've since removed where people could rent locker space for the year, but it ended up only being really utilized by our staff and then maybe like one or two customers. So we ended up moving that in the back because it was mostly staff anyway. It wasn't really generating any revenue. And I'm going to build in this whole section like a bulk bin sorted for 5,000 count boxes of bulk. So all of our bulk will be sorted and we'll have a huge giant bulk wall. We may even call it the Game Grove bulk wall up there. And it's just gonna be a lot of fun. I wanted to share that. I really like woodworking. I don't get to do it much anymore. And it's just gonna be a lot of fun to do a project with you guys. I'll share you guys the finished project at some point too. But all right, let's get into talking about Modern Horizons 3, everybody, and the reserve list. So Mark Rosewater in a Blogatog post recently said, he didn't suggest, he literally said that at one point in development, the testers and the development team behind Modern Horizons 3 had planned on putting Recurring Nightmare into Modern Horizons 3. Now, what is Recurring Nightmare? For those of you who don't know, it's an enchantment. It's on the reserve list. It allows you to sacrifice a creature, I think, to bring something out of the graveyard. It's not really that important in the whole conversation, but it's a great card. It's used in a lot of combos and Legacy and different formats and whatever. So Recurring Nightmare was slotted to be in the reprint slot for Modern Horizons 3. So the rule is that for Modern Horizons sets, any reprint must be a card that is not legal in Modern, that is an old reprint that goes into Modern. It will be the first time that it's ever printed in Modern. That's the only cards that they are allowing themselves to reprint according to them, I guess, for Modern. I guess the fetch lands are some sort of outside. That's what he said, but the fetch lands don't work in that. Anyway, whenever they want to bring in a new reprint direct to Modern, that's what they look in. They play tested with Recurring Nightmare being in that slot, that it would be printed direct to Modern and whatever. And they tested it and they said that it was too good. And then they created this card, a version of Recurring Nightmare called Chililian Nightmare. I'm not pronouncing that right. Comment section if you hate me because I can't pronounce a word. I'm sorry. I'm not good at pronunciation. But Chililian Nightmare, which is essentially a limited version of Recurring Nightmare because it's limited by the energy mechanic. And when it enters, it also has an additional effect of entering the battlefield and getting energy counters. So you've got this card. They were going to reprint the reserve list, but instead they said it was too powerful for Modern. And so they took it down to this Chililian Nightmare. So what does this all mean? Well, first, before we get into what it all means, Mark Rosewater came out and said it's possible that they put in Recurring Nightmare into the set, but then they remembered that they couldn't. So this is a really interesting dynamic that is going on the Wizards of the Coast team, where they are looking into, can we print this card, this powerful card that is a reserve list card that a lot of people love, a lot of people want, whatever. Can we put this into Modern? Can we print this and put it into Modern? And then they're limited by the fact that A, it's too powerful, but B, they come up with this realization that they can't print it because of the reserve list. So this is the information that we have, and now I want to get into what does this mean for you and for me and for the market and for the whole thing. Number one, what I hear from this is that the reserve list is safe, that they are not going to break the reserve list. Now, I know the comment section just went crazy, that you either hate that idea that they're keeping with the reserve list, or you love that idea that you're keeping with the reserve list. I'm going to go ahead and tell you I like the reserve list, okay? I'm not gatekeeping, whatever. I actually think later on I'm going to tell you why I like the reserve list. But I like the idea that cards have value. I think it adds value to the community. It adds value to the collecting, whatever. This is not the point of the conversation. But from this standpoint, it tells me that the reserve list is safe. They do not intend on breaking the reserve list based on this information that we're getting. Because they wanted to put a card in. They said maybe it's too powerful, but they said even if we wanted to, we can't. Mark Rosewater literally said we can't break the reserve list. So I believe, based on this, that the reserve list is safe and that they don't intend on breaking it. Now, that being said, obviously, Magic 30, they kind of broke that, whatever, not a big deal. All right, let's get into part 2. Wizards of the Coast is printing situationally equal or better cards to fix the power of the reserve list. And this is where I think it's really, really cool. I actually think there's different levels of this that the reserve list allows them or requires them to be more creative in their card design. And in other words, they could have just printed this card, and maybe without the reserve list, they would have just taken Recurring Nightmare, seen the price tag of Recurring Nightmare, and thrown it into Modern Horizons 3, warping, not playtesting as much, warping Modern, and eventually maybe they need to ban it or whatever, and you have this whole thing. Instead, the reserve list required them to work around and to create a better card for situations, but that was also limited by different factors. I think this is really cool design space for Magic, where they take a card that people know, like Recurring Nightmare, and they have to make it different to make it fit in that niche. And instead, they create a card that can be situationally better than this expensive reserve list card, but also has downside to it and isn't as good. And so I think it's a really cool way that they kind of fix the power of the reserve list and also create different cards of value to sell something like Modern Horizons 3. And I think that's really good. We want Modern Horizons 3 to be a set that moves and sells. I mean, at least I do. Maybe from your standpoint as a consumer, you want everything to be worthless. But I think a lot of people actually like the idea that their cards have value, that when they spend $200, $300, $400 on a box, they're actually getting value back out of that box. Maybe not the full value, but some value towards it. I think that's good. And so at the end of the day, I think this whole idea is a net positive for both the market and for new sets, because it requires them to be creative in the way that they are building cards and not just go to the well and go to the well and go to the well. The last thing I want to talk about with this is looking into like legacy and proxies. I do think that I would like Wizards to come out and say something like, give stores a-okay to run. We have people who want to do legacy locally, but a lot of people can't afford it. So then there are people who want to do proxies, but as a store, we're not allowed to run events like that. So it kind of creates this kind of weird dichotomy. I do wish that they would come out and allow some leniency to the rules on the legacy side of things in terms of allowing proxies and that kind of stuff. But at the end of the day, I think it's really interesting that when Modern Horizons 3 was being tested, they had this reserve list card in the set that they wanted to print in, or they were at least play testing to put into the set. But they looked at the reserve list and they said, no, we can't do that. And so we will be creative and to print a different version of a similar card with a similar effect. At the end of the day, I think it brings up a lot of interesting conversations. I think it brings up a lot of trust in the reserve list. And I'm very curious to hear your thoughts behind this as well. This is one of those things I feel like slipped through the radar for a lot of people just because it was just posted on the Blogatog. It wasn't kind of blown up into this big thing. So I'm curious on your thoughts on this. Do you like that they are experimenting with those ideas? And again, I think at the end of the day, it is a net positive that they are creating cards that are even in some ways better than the reserve list cards that add the power level of these sets without breaking that kind of reserve list collectability. So let me know what you think in the comment section below. I hope you have yourself a fantastic day. Remember to be kind to the people around you. If you want to hop into the Discord server, you can head on over to KitchenTableTCG.com. We also have t-shirts available for sale. Thanks to the bunch of you guys who bought those yesterday when I mentioned that. I always forget to mention mention that stuff. And if you want to support the channel, you can do so in the Discord server as well. We got the Blue Wizard tier, which is just kind of general support, some discounts on some stuff. But then the Gold Wizard tier is for those of you who want access to distribution, at anything that is available at distro, not pre-order product, but anything that is available at distro. So hopefully you have yourself a fantastic day. Be kind to the people around you. We'll see you again next video.